And later on that winter then, I think the next spring, we made a push from there and tried to get into Rome. And I was still in fire direction at the time, but on halfway into Rome, the battalion commander called us together one morning and said, well, the night before, one battery had fired too short, and they almost hit 2nd Corps headquarters. So I heard the battalion commander and the exec officer talking during the night about what they were going to do with that battery. They said, there's something wrong there. The men are just not performing right. So the next morning, he called us all together, and when that meeting was over, there were 8 of us had a new job, and I was one of them. He sent me down to that battery to take over as battery commander, and I knew very little about doing that job. But the men were happy to see the change. They apparently got tired of their battery commander, and they wouldn't do their job right. So when I went down, they took off their helmets and threw them in the air and said, yippee, right in front of that battery commander. It wasn't because they wanted me, but they were just glad to get rid of him.
Yeah.
So I thought I knew what was the matter. They had been, I would say, extraordinarily supervised and reprimanded unnecessarily. He was telling the cooks how to cook and the drivers how to drive. And so I decided I'd take the opposite approach. I'd let them do exactly as they had been doing. After all, they'd been in combat for 6 months. They knew their job. They'd been in training for 2 years in the National Guard. So I remember telling them, you do your job and I'll do mine. I'll sign the morning report, go pick out new gun positions, and we'll get along fine. And we did. We got along fine. Better. Well, we finally got in a position. By then, we were out of range. He said, bring your guns on up. So we moved 3 times in one day, and men wrestled the guns, put them in position, and by that time we were too far back, and the tanks had gone on ahead of us. Well, then, by the end of the 2nd day, men were so tired they could hardly move, and we stopped to rest. And the next morning, the first sergeant came to me and he said, one of the men tried to kill himself. I wonder if you'd come and talk to him. So I went with him, and this man had taken a carbine to his temple and fired it, and here was an ugly bulge over his left eye. He said, get away, I want to die. But we got him in an ambulance and sent him off to the hospital. By that time, one of our battalion officers had come in the fire direction center. Incidentally, the battalion had given us 2 extra officers to help with fire direction. So I thought they were taking care of things back there. But anyhow, this major said, where have you been? Why don't you get those guns in here to fire? I told him what I'd been doing. He said, you let somebody else take care of the men. You get those guns in here to fire. I think that was the only time I really got reprimanded. And I kept thinking what my mother had said, that there would be days like this. Boy, I wish I could have seen her. I wish I could have seen her then. I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, we'll continue on. If you want to continue on your story, then.
Well, anyhow, I was reprimanded for taking care of the men instead of getting those guns in a position ready to fire. So that was probably the most miserable day of my life.
Hmm. And then want to continue on? Were you guys or anything in that area, or as you moved on?
Okay, then we moved on up through Italy and until we ran into another prepared German position and we could not get through. So we got stuck there in the winter of 1944. We were up in the Apennines by then, right in the mountains, and there was snow on the passes, maybe 2 or 3 feet deep. But in our position, there was only about 8 inches of snow. But we got stuck in that position then for several months, and we did quite a bit of firing, and we also got fired on quite a bit in that position. And I remember one day I was looking out through my dugout and I saw a shell hit, and here was the clothes flying through the air, and I thought, oh my gosh, they've hit one of our dugouts. So I ran down there to see how bad it was, and 2 of the men had put their clothes in a barracks bag and threw a tarp over it, and that shell had hit that pile of barracks bags, and the clothes were flying through the air. Fortunately, nobody was hurt. But while I was there, I did poke my head in one dugout, and one man had a fragment in his jaw, but he said, "Captain, you better get back in your dugout," while they're firing at us. And later on, after the war, the first sergeant said, the men thought I was crazy out there running around while we were getting fired upon. But I think that proved to the men that I was concerned about their safety, and I'm sure it helped to get them to do what I wanted them to do. And one of my sergeants later told me that the men loved me. They would have followed me to hell and back. But he came out here from Chicago after the war with his family, and I was glad to hear that.
Wow. How do you think the war affected your life, or changed your life, played a role in your life, that war experience? Have you ever thought about that?
My mother said it put 10 years on my life, but I think it made me grow up in a hurry. When we went in, we were just shaved-tailed, snot-nosed kids that didn't know much of anything. Here we were trying to tell men what to do who were 10 years older and a lot more experienced. So we had to grow up in a hurry, and I think we did. I guess we had to use our heads for something besides a hat rack. My dad always told me to use your head for something besides a hat rack. Well, we had to use our head for something besides a helmet to get through it.